Hello everyone, welcome to Pacific Animations, and we're back with another requested animation, and this is the 1989 Pacific Typhoon Season Animation. And of course, I will still be continuing the chronological order, anyways, because I'm pretty interested in seeing what the old history of tropical cyclones is. That's for me one of the more interesting part. But of course, there's still requests people like to see, especially with animations. So without further ado, let's go to this one. This will be sort of the batch of other requests. Of course, there are any more new requests, then do say them, and I will try to get to them. So without further ado, let's go. Winona, really early in the season, in early January, across the Central Pacific at high latitude, moves across. God, man, this is interesting. Goes across the rota into PER, tropical depression, makes landfall. I mean, look at that track. That is due south. I've never seen a track that's gone due southwesterly. I mean, I've seen Goni. That was within the PER, really. This is from the Central Pacific, injecting the southwest track all the way up to the tropical depression based landfall. It's been fluctuating between tropical depression, tropical storm, right past actually Saipan much closer, and then that's really quite interesting. The landfall is near Samar Island. I thought Samar Island was actually slightly north. No, that is Samar Island. That's correct. But yeah, that's quite interesting to see how that forms. This is more like, this is not really like any season because it's still all January activity, but January activity much closer to PR, tropical depression, likely PR named, and that is what you would expect if it was a January tropical cyclone activity, and it's actually and it's early activity. Now we skipped February completely and skipped March actually completely as well. It's really interesting how that's now into the mid-April. Nuclear pressure area just within. That is the Micronesian region, yeah. Let me just see, that is that Sata 1? It's Sata 1 Island. That's Shook Micronesia state. And this is Andy, of course. Actually, I do have some remaining memory on these cyclones, but Andy, major hurricane, typhoon, major typhoon, category 5. Actually, I did not realize it's category 5, but really early season as well, recurved very quickly. And it's interesting because this season, of course, has been historic for the Mariana Island chain in Guam, because the tropical cyclones, of course, within April and the back-to-back next tropical cyclones have really been affecting this region a lot. The Philippines in particular, not so much at all actually. It was expected to be like this, but really it's been more than expected for the Mariana Islands. And this tropical cyclone is actually it's interesting because it's a category 5 intensity tropical cyclone, but it's recurved all the way back out despite approaching due westerly motion. So it's a very sharp turn actually, really sharp, because like most tropical cyclones don't really have that much of a sharp turn, but it did become category 5 very close to landmass. Of course, that's relevant to this season, which has been tropical cyclones that have made category 5 landfall, but this tropical cyclone form a bit more central, not as far east towards the Central Pacific, like closer to Central Pacific as an AOI. And these ones obviously moved more northwest and then intensified and then made landfall, or at least been recurved closer. Actually, they're not really even recurved. They've just got in close. Unless obviously Dolphin, which did manage to go over. That obviously Dolphin formed way in the Central Pacific. But yeah, Andy, it's interesting. Category 5. It did intensify too. And now it's dissipating. And that's actually really intense as well for the time period. It did a lot like Woot Tip. That's the wrong way around. But yeah, Woot Tip 2019. AOI Drakelos, it's Binning, Brenda. Obviously, this the old sort of naming list. They don't use these ones anymore, but. Brenda made tropical storm manifolds across the entire basin. Now it's identified the category 1, almost category 2, so it looks like 80 knots likely, middle May to late May. Yeah, it is as well. Very low pressure, actually, interesting. I was thinking, like, this is quite similar to Yagi, Obviously, it's typical with the Western Pacific, anyways, but this is quite similar to Yagi. 968 millibars for 80 knots. That's very interesting. The Cecil now becomes a typhoon, category 2, almost category 3 there, so almost maybe 90. It's 90. There's 95 knots. There's no 90 knots. There's no 95 knots. That's what my point was. And yeah, it is 90 knots there. Actually, is there 95 knots? Unless I'm tripping. Actually, no. 85 knots there is, and then you got the 95, and then no, you got the 90, and then you got the 95. Okay, there is 95 knots. Which knots is missing? I think there's one that's missing. Actually, no, it's not knots. It's just conversion to miles per hour. There's no values between 90 and 100 on the conversion side. But Cecil, extremely deadly actually. I mean, yeah, it moves basically due west, rapidly intensifies almost unexpectedly. Intense landfall in an actually quite decently populated region. I've got to familiarise myself with the exact names of some of the regions, because of course it's quite relevant, especially these sort of major points along the Vietnam coast are very relevant points when it comes to tropical cyclone activity, landfalls, and just TC tracks overall. But yeah, Kring and Dot, Typhoon Dot. This one I do remember Dot. Major typhoon. I keep saying hurricane because we just saw that hurricane animation, but category 2 landfall in the southern side, due southern side of Hainan, the beacons in the Gulf of Tonkin. So it does not. One in cases, a bit like Hainan actually, where it weakens into the it's still in a weakening state. Across into the Gulf of Tonkin. Of course, this made a landfall on the southern side, which actually might have been the contributor to the fact that it sustains weakening. But yeah, 105 knots. Very interesting. Another low pressure area in late June period. Very close to the northern islands. Ellis loses its Philippine PR range name, makes landfall on a ton of islands actually. It's small or not, probably likely large circulation here, and it becomes extra tropical as well. So across the Sea of Japan, and then not really traceable at that point afterwards. It seemingly does not seem traceable. I trust their judgment there. Elang in early July as well. They typhoon landfall right close to that massive form near, and then weakens in another AOY. It's interesting, moving southwestwards, due westerly. This is Gordon, moves towards Pagan, and then now it's intensifying. This is going to be likely a strong tropical cyclone. I already know this. Yeah, this is going to be Gordon. Category 5 intensity landfall. I mean, this really. The track is textbook for rapidly intensifying tropical cyclone, but it actually did not intensify within much distance towards landfall. It's quite like Man Yi, but yet Man Yi obviously was much farther south. Was it towards Katanduan? Yeah, it was towards Katanduan as Man Yi. Category 5 landfall, but here it actually intensified to, I think this is 165 knots, but yeah, rapidly intensifying, actually more like, as we're using actual analogues for the actual location and the intensification, and that's more like Megi, and then weakened slightly, perhaps at 145 knots, but yeah, big landfall. Luzon is just that one magnet that constantly gets these high intensity landfalls. So this is the brunt of it already in July, category 5, and actually interesting because this season already has had a category 5 major landfall with Barbie, so that's really interesting to talk relevant actually with the current basin-wide, because if I get an opportunity to talk basin-wide currently, I definitely would like to. But yeah, Gordon 891 millibars, actually quite a typical sort of relationship with 165 knots. That pressure relationship works out right, but yeah, also deadly. It's gonna be quite deadly, especially with the older seasons. The building codes are not quite as great. Of course, we got back to 1989, the typhoon season, so you've got to just think about that factor in, about the huge damages in terms of buildings destroyed. Actually, is probably, they have to be because of the monetary costs. But the other thing is category 2 intensity landfall. Actually, a very interesting track. You can see we can actually trace. I like these traceable points. You can see it's formed just south of due south of Yap, very far south. Actually, you can see some of these points are actually getting very far south now. These are getting below 5 degrees north. These are getting like, this one here is like 3 degrees north. This one's like, this one's probably about 4 degrees north, and there's moving landfall all the way across, and then right on approach again. Looks like that it's almost like Mexico. This very close to the land masses, this sort of coastal point, but the sea surface temperatures, and it's away from the open shear, and that is within the South China Sea, just closer towards landfall. You got to see intensifying greatly, and now you've got Judy as well at the same time, which intensifies higher northerly latitudes, and a Kyushu-based landfall, Category 2, makes landfall on the other side of the island as well, tropical storm landfall as well into South Korea, which is one of these regions that are becoming almost, I'm pretty sure there's a statistical relationship, at least there's probably, I think there's a very high likelihood of less frequent northerly latitudes, particularly South Korean based landfalls, because in the 2020 seasons there's been very few, in the last few years been very few as well. But yeah, I don't want to jinx any sort of relationship, but I'm giving the statistical point entirely, so there's nothing here to jinx about. But we got Ken and Mac now as well, tropical storms that are forming in the Ken and Lola. So this is actually one of the very few net points where they actually do this, because obviously currently there exists like Chan Hon, but that's a Dobra name that exists already as a Dobra name. This name got given and Dobra, it got given in Ken Lola. So what happened here? Ken probably the tropical cyclone part of Ken probably dissipated, and then it became a remnant low, at least it got redesignated as redesignated as a tropical cyclone that basically came back from the dead, and it now got redesignated as Lola in its new form. So it's almost like a new tropical cyclone, but because it was already traceable AOY, but obviously previously the history of Ken, I think it's just gained Ken Lola rather than getting named. Obviously, it can't just get named entirely new, so it's getting named Dolrao instead, which actually is very rare in terms of the Western Pacific in particular. You have actually, it's like you have fewer, but still a lot more example. I think not a lot more, but you have a solid amount in the Eastern Pacific, and then you have some in Atlantic as well, but not as common either. Like Mac, high latitude near Guasawara, moves due north and makes a landfall and a new low pressure area. Interesting here, I always like making these judgments, but you can see the tropical cyclones and what they do as they interact with the landmass into eastern China near Zhejiang. This case here moves basically due west towards Wuhan. This is all remnant low based, but yeah, moves due westerly, so that's quite interesting to see that sort of activity. At least it becomes traceable to all the way inland to this point, but the depression part of the tropical part of it ends very quickly. In some cases, depending on the area, you can make these very weird loops, which are just interesting to observe. Also, how far inland can it get? And this one's made it into the central north region, which is quite impressive. An electrical side there. Lots of AOIs. This obviously, I think this active season, we've got 16W. So this is solidly active for this point, and which just reached to mid-August. Two tropical cyclones following Fujiwara effect, following Nancy intensifies to Category 2 at a very high latitude, a lot like Maria in the 2024 season. That actually was interesting because that intensified from a subtropical storm actually, I think. Now for AOIs, a very interesting case here, 19W formed in the East China Sea. That's very interesting for a basin tropical cyclone place to form, tropical cyclogenesis at least. Not a huge phase of activity. Right now we're going back into phase again with new two AOIs. This is reaching a sort of point in which the monsoon troughs are leaving like this vorticity. These not very tropical wave sort of activity. Some of these might be like these ones, maybe from that may have formed more southerly latitudes, interacted with the land, not the land masses, but other sort of ALYs or vorticity at least, and now it's formed locatable tropical lows, because these are tropical lows. These are not actually detecting the actual invests, and the invests have a different part of the track which is not here, so you can make that deduction. Well, you have to at least to make it. But we have Roger, which is named, makes typhoon landfall. Again, another instance of right towards landfall, the favourable pattern. But this also favourable because the warm current is right there. I've got to remind myself what the name of the warm current is, but makes landfall there. Roger, very high altitude, that looks tropical. There are some interesting parts of tropical cyclones that become extratropical. How far north they reach that extratropical state. It's quite interesting to see where they go. Yeah, another decently north tropical cyclone, and it's moving back south and west. Sarah, I think I do remember Sarah as well. It's the tropical cyclone, yeah, erratic track. Yeah, and it rapidly intensifies. Category 4, major landfall. This is one of those tropical cyclones that we have Sarah and we have Tip now. Tip, very historically well-known names, but Sarah moves towards the landmass. PR does not intensify much. The stall actually helps it because then it creates an erratic track where it moves due north, and then as a result you've now got a tropical cyclone that's again stalled near the Batanes, near the Philippine sort of major, the northern islands, and then you've got now the stalling is obviously going to create like almost like a Dorian, this slow moving, constantly feeding off high favourable conditions. These sort of conditions just south enough, not close to Taiwan, are very favourable. Like Krathon, and then they intensify, and then it moves towards landmass. In the big intensities, but obviously slightly weakens. Sarah is one of the cases of loops. I completely forgot about this, but Sarah is one of those names that I now do recall. Makes that loop. You can see how it approaches landmass. It moves due north and then moves west, and then makes that full loop, which is like gamey, because it's actually again a classic example of mountain steering flow disruption event. As a result, creates this erratic track. It's a very packed, interesting season with a lot of different things. A couple of intense tropical cyclones, not actually that many high intensity to talk about, but it's just overall very unique. Different things about it. I mean, like this season's unique, but obviously every season's got its own sort of uniqueness that you got to observe and see it for itself, how it varies. And then obviously I talk about the real-time or relatable examples, or like near ones like talk about gaming, but it's quite interesting how this one's setting up already. And then we have Angela. This is 1989. This is not 1995. So Angela will not quite be the same, but it's still re-intensifying greatly to a category 5 as well. Brian, of course, I almost just missed that one, but Brian is one of those tropical cyclones that have a big history with like the Thailand, Vietnam is one of those ones on the records. High intensity tropical cyclone landfall, and we have Angela, which caught my attention mainly because it rapidly intensified into the PR. Classic case of rapid intensification. But as a category 4 marker, I think that is potentially 115 knots. But you can see, so it moves west, makes a little jog, moves back southwest. That's keeping it actually away from shear, and you're gonna have sort of imparting like this sort of easterly flow that's going to keep it moving due westerly like this, and as a result you're getting these favourable isotones very close to the land masses. These land masses, the isotones I mean around this point, are very favourable textbook for rapid intensification. A lot of different cases where it's literally at just near the point of the landfall landmass itself, and it intensifies so much. So this is a category 4 marker there, and it is 115 knots. Angela, another category 5 landfall. I actually forgot about the fact that Angela has almost 2 identical category 5 landfalls. I completely forgot that they actually turn back westerly. That's really interesting. But Rubing, Angela, tropical cyclone, category 5 back to back major on Luzon. I can think of 2024 with like major Category 4 landfalls, but that season had one Category 5 landfall. There's been quite a few Category 5 landfalls. Last season did not have such, and 2023 did not seemingly have it either. But yeah, I mean, this season did have one, but it's not obviously not PR rated, but still in general Western Pacific, we've had one. But yeah, two already, so this is already becoming extremely rare. Think about it as well, because like other basins don't have Category 5 landfalls much. Actually, the North Indian Ocean, strangely enough, does have like this sort of higher numbers. Like it can have these sort of one Category 5 sort of landfalls more frequent. Though Atlantic does have actually quite a lot. It might have the most behind the Western Pacific, because the Atlantic does have, like last year we also had Melissa, which is Category 5 landfall, but that was the only one. So, and the year before that, there was none either. So, yeah, the Pacific is still on top, but so other basins do have a decent record. Eastern Pacific is one of those basins that have a lot of intensified tropical cyclones, but they move due westerly, so it doesn't retain those Category 5 landfalls. Only has one. Dan becomes a typhoon. This is October, so now this is prime. Also, you can see there was 160 knots for Angela. Dan, another Category 2 landfall, and moves the depression over Taiwan, Thailand, towards Vientiane. And let's see, no, intensifying tropical cyclone. These are names that I do remember. LC does become a Category 5, I think. I mean, based on this track, you would tell it would. But yeah, another Category 5 landfall. I mean, this is crazy. Three Category 5 landfalls in Luzon in a season is just like, I mean, this cements the season as is already incredible to even observe something like this. And this sort of season, imagine it occurred now. Like it would be really crazy to do something like this. The forest intensifies towards just around the PR, almost outskirts around the PR. I mean, this October is going to have these recurving tropical cyclones, which is obviously interesting to observe, because actually there has not been many. We actually have examples, or at least intense ones. So we had a very early season, but this was April. We had Andy, but this is now forest. We have one example. A very landmass battering season, and obviously of very high intensities, more than 2006, which is obviously well known, high intensity. And this is This is the tropical cyclone of the season, really, in my opinion. This tropical cyclone broke a lot of records in almost every way like imaginable. But like the idea of this even happening is crazy. Because like really, there's not many records of this sort of stuff. But which becomes a Category 1, forms very low latitudes. I mean, this is already like really low latitude. Unfortunately, they don't have latitudinal markers. 5 degrees north, roughly about 6 degrees north. So that's going to be 7 to 8 degrees north. Actually, about 7 degrees north. So, but of course, this is completely different to like the same latitude as Philippines. Like a tropical cyclone can approach the Philippines many times, but this region here, the Gulf of Thailand, does not foster tropical cyclones very often at all. And so it's of course very rare alone. So even just for typhoon, you have tropical cyclones that formed all the way in the Western Pacific, come through and are losing that steam in Category 1 intensity, and then become tropical storm and weaken. But having an actual tropical cyclone form, intensify as a typhoon, that's already a big deal. And now it becomes, it's like it has this extra bit of landmass because of the geography, rapidly intensifies. Because I mean the conditions here are pristine. Like there's no real conditions that favour tropical cyclogenesis. But Category 4 game, which makes a huge, very impactful landfall, and then it becomes a cyclone now. Cyclone makes landfall on the Andaman Islands, which is interesting as well. I mean, it makes sense because as you're approaching the landmass in this unique geography, it's actually obviously moving basically just due west into the landmass itself. So there's no real way for it to not really impact that landmass. Actually, a lot of big tropical cyclones, some of the ones in history in North Indian Ocean basin alone is they actually have formed towards the Gulf of Thailand region, like as an AOI, not as a true tropical cyclone, and then they actually intensify into the Bay of Bengal itself. So that's something that progresses and it eventually forms, but this is obviously formed already in that region and now moving due westly, and that's now as a cyclone in the North Indian Ocean basin. I mean, you just don't see also many animations, that's like one season at least from season relevant. You don't see this. You don't get to see many animations that demonstrate a tropical cyclone going into the Indian Ocean basin. At least of this intensity as well. And it comes briefly around 130, 135 knots, approaching the very favourable land conditions in obviously the North Indian Ocean. No surprises here into the southern Indian region, which is just around near Kerala, but just slightly north. Category 4 landfall actually. But yeah, I mean, just look at this map and you just see that, like, just look at all these tropical cyclones. Look at the ones that form at the same latitudes all the way over here, and then you just see this. Like, there's no real way to describe this. Yeah, 1,006 fatalities overall. Again, very deadly. Sort of no surprise, because these sort of tropical cyclones are really very vulnerable when they're not when you're not likely to see these sort of landfalls. Like, look at Kenya, for example. It was a very unusual region, and of course, as a result, becomes extremely deadly. And it also does combine with the fact that these regions are quite vulnerable, but that's a combination of factors. And now you have Hunt, which is in a very favourable PR conditions to become category 4 likely. Looks like it at least becomes category 3 at least. It does weaken actually, interestingly enough. And a lot of conditions actually don't favour the weakening, which is interesting to say it like that, because typically in most basins it would be, but in the PR region it's quite uncommon. But it's got to be related to the internal dynamics often being disrupted. Like you have Usagi, which intensified and reached its peak, but it's the internal dynamics, making an unstable eye wall that then collapses, becomes a much bigger eye wall, and now in that process of becoming much larger, it's also the shear, and then becomes 115 knots and landfall instead, the much more significant intensity. Irma 1989. I don't remember anything about Irma in 1989 other than the fact that obviously Irma has a huge history in this name or intensity, but it does look like Irma does become category 5 in this season as well. Luckily it's in the PR region, Walding. And it does recur. This is December as well. We have 145 knots. I just want to just rewind just to see, does it? Yeah, it does. It comes to category 545 knots within the December time frame itself. Actually, does it? No, it doesn't actually. Yeah, okay, it almost did. But that's 308 ace. I did not realise that was there. But yeah, a decently high ace for the season so far. But there are quite there's quite a few tropical cyclone paths as well. And then 35 Ws. It's still the early December period. It sustains. It looks like we have another one. This is mid-December. Now this is getting to late December. This is late December now. We still have a tropical cyclone AOI near the Chuk state. This is Jack, which does intensify in favourable conditions because it's still favourable in these regions. Category 4 intensity, category 5 in late December. You don't get to see it often. Obviously you have Rai Odette, which is a very well known example, but this is a recurving tropical cyclone that comes to category 5. Also, I'd like to know the return periods and statistics behind this more. I'd like to know that, but it's just interesting to observe this. 145 knots. It also makes it one of the more intense December tropical cyclones. I think what a season that was. You can see the animation here, just the way it formed. Just formed the eye as well. Angela does have the highest ace. Two big names that have completely, that always have had a big history, but I mean, Angela had a decent amount of, actually, yeah, both have had, actually, yeah, both have had pretty significant histories. But high ace tropical cyclone here as well. 50.58, which is actually quite high. And for any season, it will be high. Yeah, for that season, very high as well. Gordon appears to be the most intense tropical cyclone, which is 165 knots. 891 millibars, so a sub 9 millibar tropical cyclone we have there. We have, I mean, many intense tropical cyclones here. And a lot of category 5s actually. So how many is that? Is that 5 or 6? That's 6 actually. I think that's 6. Yes. 1, 2. Also mine, like, there's also quite a lot of other tropical cyclones here as well, but not many actually major ones here. Actually, in fact, there's actually, it seemingly looks like there's more category 5s and 4s here, but like there's 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So yeah, there's actually, I think there's only one tropical cyclone more in category 4 intensity than category 5, which is a crazy stat. Yeah, that's, but yeah, a huge number of tropical cyclones that become category 5 intensity, because the 2024 season had around 5, potentially 6. I don't think it was 6. I think it was 5 category 5 tropical cyclones. So I mean, this one had one more than that. I mean, because it also had the case of, you had Andy and you have Jack, which is, that helped to change the fact that it had 6. So major landfalls, it's 3 overall. Category 5 intensity landfalls. Gordon did weaken slightly more to 140 knots. Same as Angela. I mean, these are still major landfalls. Like, the thing that, if you've seen the footage of Michael 2018, you know what I mean. But also your other category 5 intensity landfalls actually gave. Is this the landfall that made land? Was this the North Indian Ocean one, or the Gulf of Thailand one? This might have been the Gulf of Thailand one. I mean, deadly overall. This is only basin specific. Okay, yeah. So this is only basin specific. So it made 130 knots landfall. That's actually very impressive. 130 knots landfall in the Gulf of Thailand. But yeah, I mean, what a season. But with that, I will see you in the next animation.